All right, Doug Smith on LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, big fan of connecting, and the concept of a mastermind, surrounding yourself with people who know things that you don't, who can impart great wisdom. So today I'm talking with David Bloom, Chief Development and Operating Officer for Capriotti Sandwich Shop. And one of the big questions I get all the time, David, because I work with restaurants all over the place, is they have this idea that their concept, they want to grow it. They want to become national. They want to become, I guess, big time, if you will. You've done it with Capriotti's, or you're doing it now. Your background, you have done this several times. So even though maybe the term expert could be a little bit loose, but I consider you an expert in this field because of your background. If you would briefly tell us your background and what led you to Capriotti's. And then I have a couple questions to ask you that I think people who are in the restaurant space could find valuable on if they have this grand idea of becoming bigger. But first off, your background about Capriotti's and your background when it comes to growing brands.
Sure, I appreciate it. Back in terms of background and really track record, I've grown. This will be the fourth or fifth brand that I've worked with and on scaling, and have grown brands into thousands of locations in 33 countries to date. Not primarily in the restaurant industry. I was one of the original guys with Quiznos. That was there from 18 to 5,000 shops, and I was the largest franchisee, largest area developer, and senior VP of brand expansion. And then really just kind of using what I learned there, was able to repeat that for a number of other companies globally, in education and home services, and again in restaurants. Good friends of mine invested in Capriotti's a few years ago. Both the current chair and previous chairwoman of the IFA, and very large multi-unit operators themselves. They own Domino's China and Topgolf China, and sit on the board of 18, I think, restaurant companies today, including Domino's International, Del Frisco's, et cetera. Oh. And the reality is that there's a lot of, common denominators in what companies that do it well, what they do or have in common, and companies that fail. And just statistically, to put it in perspective, there are about 400 or so, give or take, new franchise companies started every year. And fast forward 5 years, less than 10% of them are still in business. Wow. So the mortality rate's pretty high. And so knowing that going in means it's a good idea to do your homework, before you embark on this endeavor. And there's, like I said, some kind of steps that I think people that have done it well and have done it before tend to follow. And so really probably would be happy to share those.
Yeah. In fact, that was my first question is there a common denominator that you have seen in the success that you've had? And likewise, is there a common denominator in that 90% in 5 years who typically fail?
Yeah, again, I think, first of all, we utilize a platform called EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System. A friend of ours, Gino Wickman, wrote it. It's used by some 10,000 companies today. And I would suggest, anybody starting on this, think about utilizing some sort of platform that guides you through this process. But step number one is sort of having a 10-year vision and being very specific. So Capriotti's 10-year vision some years ago was, to be at 500 locations by the end of year 2025. Well, we're now approaching 5 years out, and we're actually well ahead of that. We've got 100 open, 200 in the pipeline, and growing very, very quickly. So now we're starting to reset our 10-year vision and recalibrate, but knowing exactly where you want to go and thinking of all the resources, the capital, the personnel, all that you're going to have to put together to make that happen. So you have some realistic view, not just sort of a dream of, is this executable? Is this doable? Do I have the skill sets? Or what are my skill sets? What skill sets do I need to bring in? Do I need to put together a board of directors? All those things that you want to think through before you really put your money down and go after this, to say to yourself, am I really dedicated to this? Do I believe I can do it? And what's it going to take to be successful? Because I've been in restaurants many, many years, and business many years, and have lost a lot more money than I'd like to tell you about. And it's that's avoidable to at least some degree. So certainly, I think it's a good idea to take as much risk out of the process by doing your homework up front.
Okay.
Go ahead, Doug. Go ahead, Doug.
But no, I was going to say, is there a common misconception per se of people who want to go after this? Is there something that typically they overlook or they miss in the step that trips them up from the beginning that someone should start thinking about now or starting to implement now to lay the overall groundwork?
Yeah, first of all, I would just recommend another book. It's called Start With Why. It's by Simon Sinek.
Mm-hmm. Great book.
Great book. And I think you really need to know what your why is, because if it's just, hey, I want to make a lot of money and run a big company, you're probably not going to make it. You've got to really have a why. What's your passion? Why are you doing this? And that's got to resonate with other people if you expect them to join you, either as franchisees or employees or investors. So I'd say that's really important, really understanding your why. Once you know that, the next question is what? What is it you're going to do? And really having someone take an objective look, and you taking an objective look at your business and saying, what is really different about my business? If I'm opening a donut shop or a coffee place or a sandwich, what's really different? Do you really have a significant point of differentiation that would resonate with consumers and with franchise prospects and with investors? And then thirdly, is it scalable? Do you really have locked down unit economics? Because running 1 or 2 restaurants or 3 restaurants or even a small group is very different than running a franchise system where you're now layering in royalties and advertising fees and all of those expenses into the business. And so having a scalable model that's repeatable by other people that maybe don't have your skill set, and an economic model that's dependable and provides a sufficient enough return on investment. And so I think those are sort of the building blocks that you've got to establish first and put into a business plan, and let a lot of people take shots at it, because, a lot of times you think, my dad used to have a saying, it's, you think it's the donut, but everybody else just sees the hole. It's just because it's cool to you or your family doesn't mean the rest of the world's going to see the points of differentiation or want to be in that business. So there's lots of great ideas, but going through that process and identifying those and laying those out, I think, is really the most important first step.
One of the most common things I hear with all the clients we work with is that they're working in the business, not on the business, where they're so involved in the day-to-day operations that until they step away from that, they can't really have the time to look at the big vision. Would that essentially be step number 1? They can't be working in it all the time. They have to be working on it, which allows for more of a broad view.
Well, unfortunately, in the beginning, you're probably going to be doing both. It's, until you've got enough scale that you can really, step away until you've raised the capital to allow you to step away to some degree, and most entrepreneurs are involved in their business. But if you've got the luxury of not, you've got to have the dedicated time to really think about this. And again, hundreds and hundreds of franchise companies start every year, get to maybe 10, 12, 20, franchises, and then just collapse. And when they collapse, it's a mess. It's not fun. So that is totally avoidable by doing just what you said. You put in the time up front, take your time, talk to the experts. There are lots of people that have done this many, many times. I talk to people literally on a weekly basis that are thinking about doing this. And, one great thing about the franchise industry is people that are really good at this and have done this before are always happy to talk to you. And 90% of the time they'll do it free of charge. They've been successful and they want to share that, they want to give back. And so that's what's great about the franchise community. Get involved, join the International Franchise Association, join the National Restaurant Association chapter, get involved with people that are actually doing this and, are in the middle of doing what it is you hope to do, and ask them to look at it. And 9 times out of 10, they'll be more than happy to do that.
Okay. One more question for you. Let's say everyone or whoever's watching this, they've got all their ducks in a row. They have their plan, they've got it all put together, and they're looking to now branch out and to franchise. Not asking for your company's trade secrets per se, but are there certain qualities that you look for in someone to become a franchisee, or a specific city or location that you would want to move into? How do you grade that to be able to branch that way?
Well, again, I think in the beginning, you've got to prove that your model is scalable. So most brands will start in a given geographic area, sort of more of a hub and spoke model, so that they can support them. And, you know, specific to restaurants, you've got to have locked down your supply chain. And usually that's easily done regionally and not so easily done nationally. So that's what, you know, I think brands will typically start and prove themselves in at least, you know, 3, 4, half a dozen, if not more, locations in a given geography before they decide to really branch out from there. And I think that's smart, you know, something you can literally drive to and put your hands on and check out. It's a very different thing when you start supporting franchisees on the other side of the country, and takes a very different skill set and systems and processes in place to ensure their success. You know, entering a new market that's never heard of you before is usually a big challenge in the restaurant industry. So proving that a few times over is going to be a really important step as well. So again, kind of having this laid out, this progression laid out, and I would say, you know, I kind of use the rule of 3. It's going to take at least 3 times as long and cost 3 times as much as you think it's going to take and cost. And that's probably really conservative. So I think, you know, knowing that going in, making sure you've got the capital put in place, making sure you're willing to give it the time it's going to take to do that, is also a really good first step.
Good advice, good info. David Bloom, Chief Development and Operating Officer, Capriotti Sandwich Shop. And now, as I mentioned to you, David, I work with restaurants all over. There are many people who I have conversations with who are looking at doing franchising. Maybe they own and operate several different restaurants and they're looking at maybe branching out. How would someone get a hold of you if they're interested in trying to partner with you and become a franchise operator for Capriotti's in whatever city they're in?
Sure. You can either just email me at david.bloom, B-L-O-O-M, at capriottis.com, or go to owncapriottis.com. There's a tremendous amount of information and resources where we're publishing almost, you know, weekly in one trade magazine or another, and do a tremendous amount of, you know, media participation. So there are a lot of great resources actually available on the owncapriottis.com website. Is a book by David Barr, an ebook free by David Barr on franchising and getting into franchising. David is the current chairman of the International Franchise Association, on the board of Domino's International. I said he sits on about 18 boards, and he provides some great resources on anybody thinking about getting into this.
Excellent. David, thank you so much for your time, sir. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Good to talk to you, and best of luck.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.